Hello, YouTube. Today we are going over a redemption from our Twitch page, which was done by Upset Colton, and he wanted us to do a Rough Rider Deathless build. However, after some discussion, we decided that the main focus was the Rough Rider, and the Deathless was basically just to get it down to 1 health. And as the point redemption is basically meant to make a completely viable build that can do everything in the game, the Rough Rider was the point that we kept. And with that, it did have to be a Blade Fury build, and we did have to specifically use the Gravity Snare action skill. So after some discussion and kind of figuring out where we wanted to take the build and here and there, this is going to be the build showcase for this build. So we are, of course, using the Gatling Blade Fury so that we can use automatic and taking advantage of the action skill and next 2 mags corrosive damage combined with the 200% corrosive damage we get from the Bounty Hunter. So because we are using the action skill and next 2 mags, we want to make sure we're using ammo regeneration on our shield, and that is going to be from the while terrified, gain ammo regeneration, and the higher you are terrified, the more bonus you get because of that. So we do throw the melee attacks have a 25% chance to apply terror to yourself on our Fish Slap, and the Fish Slap is going to be melee, and the Blade Fury is melee. So combining those two things, we are constantly getting terror built up and getting that ammo regeneration, meaning we constantly have our next 2 mags as corrosive damage. Now, because we do not actually have a shield, we want to make sure that we are constantly regenerating health, and because of that, I wanted to make sure that we have the Knife Drain, and as we are already doing melee, it just made the most sense to go Knife Drain Static Charge. Now, getting into the build itself, we are, of course, using Gravity Snare, and after some testing, no points in Purple Tree were really helping the build be very viable, so we are kind of cycling the action skill in with our Gravity Snare and taking advantage of the mobbing sections, grabbing up those enemies, and while the snare itself only really stuns the enemy for about 1 second, it still is nice to be able to have a area where they are stunned for that 1 second, hitting them, taking advantage of the static charge so that you are getting a tendril connecting each of those enemies and constantly dealing a large area damage to them. In Blue Tree, we are picking up 3 in Persistent Hunter for the gun damage, 1 in Go for the Eyes for the pet critical damage, 1 in Ferocity for the pet damage, 1 in Who Rescued Who for the health regeneration, 3 in He Bites for the damage reflection off of pet, 5 in Frenzy so that anytime we have full stacks we're getting 48% more damage, 2 in Hive Mind for the damage sharing between yourself and pet, 1 in Psycho Hit on a Stick for the extra pet damage and pet movement speed, 5 on Barbaric Yop so that we get an extra 200% bonus to our passives, and because we are taking advantage of the corrosive damage, and Spider and Scorcher boosts passively our elemental damage, that boosts our corrosive damage by 30%, it also boosts our shock damage from our static charge. 3 in Pack Tactics for the extra damage for ourselves and pet, and 1 in Dominance so that enemies are being dominated and not attacking us, and there is a chance anytime we deal a melee attack that is a longer lasting occurrence. In Red Tree, we pick up 3 in Leave No Trace for the extra chance of ammo regeneration on critical hit, 2 in Second Intention for the reload speed just in case we do have to reload for some reason, 5 in Interplanetary Starcraft for the extra damage, 5 in Hunter's Eye for the extra damage depending on the enemy that we're fighting, so critical hit damage for humans, armor damage for robots, and damage reduction versus beasts. The 3 in Head Count for the extra cooldown, 3 in Big Game for the extra skill duration, 3 in Most Dangerous Game for the extra gun damage, 1 in Galactic Shadow for the critical hit damage, and 1 in Megavore for the extra critical hit chance. In Green Tree, we're picking up 1 in Self-Repairing System for the health regeneration, 5 in Furious Attack for the extra gun damage, 5 in Eager to Impress for the extra skill cooldown, 1 in Lick the Wounds so that if we cannot get a kill while we're in Fight for Your Life, or we don't have an enemy to attack, we can have the pet give us a revive, 3 in Turn Tail and Run for the extra health regeneration, and 3 Fast and Furious for the extra gun damage. As I said in Purple Tree, there was not really any benefit for the build itself because we wanted to make sure we were outputting a lot of damage, and Purple Tree does not help flak damage at all. There was not really any points that were going to help us. It was just taking advantage of Gravity Snare for action skill end and taking advantage of the combination of Static Charge and the stun that we get from Gravity Snare. And as always in our builds, we like to point out that the Guardian rank perks are maxed out, so if you don't have Hollow Point and you don't have Groundbreaker, you are going to see a decrease in your damage, especially because this build does take advantage of melee attacks. You will see some pretty crazy damage when Groundbreaker goes off. Now let's get into the mobbing and embossing so that you can see what this build can do. We will see you on the other side. Alright guys, that has been the build. If you would like to get your hands on this and have some fun with the Rough Rider setup for this, there will be a link to the Discord down below where PC players can pick up a save file and have some fun with that on your own. Now, if there's anything you would like to see, or if you would like to redeem the channel point, choose my next build yourself on our Twitch channel. There will be a link down below. And of course, any questions you have, especially before Wonderlands is coming up, as we're kind of rounding out the ending of our time here in Borderlands before we start mainly playing Wonderlands. I would love any suggestions or questions you have, and we'll get those covered. With that, guys, have been your local sassy SwinLaw. Stay classy, Pandora.